Hey everyone, welcome back to Detroit here at Automotive Logistics and Supply Chain Global. A little bit of a change here, bring you some voices from the Automotive Logistics team. I'm here with my colleague Hazel Southwell, who's joined us just in the past few weeks as our assistant editor. First time at an Automotive Logistics event, first time really getting to see this industry up close and personal. But we wanted to sum up some of the key takeaways of what we've already been hearing today. Hazel, we kicked off today with a keynote from Jacob Ward from the Department of Energy, talking about sustainable supply chains, energizing the supply chain, investing in battery, the direction that the industry is going, and a lot of money from the government that's going to go in that way to develop a local supply chain or a regional supply chain. And we immediately followed by a panel on resiliency in the supply chain. For you, as someone new to the sector observing this, were they speaking from the same hymn? Were they singing from the same hymn book, or were there some contradictions between what we were hearing?
I think I wouldn't necessarily call it contradictions, but there's definitely very different angles in terms of the interests and the influence that different bodies can exert. So, of course, for a government body, for the Department of Energy, they can legislate, they can say that they want everything nearshored or onshored or friendshored, which was a word that Dr. Ward used. And that's a way of them controlling it. That's a way of them being able to say, hey, look, we can force you to make this sustainable. We can force you to make this work on our shores, because that's where they have, the legislative power. But for a company, when you're looking at that resilience, when you're looking at where there have been fail points, the lessons of the past few years have been, well, actually, maybe we want to diversify. Maybe we want to have a way of moving around the globe, of keeping our production active, because you don't know where somewhere's going to be an issue, somewhere's not. And also you might find that simply, or we have found for sure, that moving stuff around has been one of the biggest challenges.
Absolutely, and in terms of making a nearshoring decision, I don't think there are many who would disagree with the, hopefully increasing nearshoring, but it's not a decision that can be taken overnight. The automotive industry sources based on where tooling is, unless we're talking about raw materials, and of course supply of that is very different. So I think just from my point of view, how the industry still needs to recognize that the supply of these materials is still coming from multiple locations, even as we ramp up something like EV, where there are clearly gaps in some of the regional supply chains. So, and that actually led into we had some forecasts on the industry, including the amount of EVs that we'll see produced and sold. That was coming from Auto Forecast Solutions, and we went right into a panel looking into the details of EV supply chains. What are some key takeaways from you from that?
I think something that, unless you've just woken up in 2022 and this is all coming as a shock, everybody knows that electrification is the big frontier at the moment. It's the big change. It's the huge challenge of the industry at the moment, or one of the huge challenges. And that comes with all kinds of supply chain implications. One of the biggest ones is batteries, and you can't get away from that. Even if you try and sort of go down a fuel cell route, you're facing very similar sourcing issues in terms of the materials, and you probably need batteries anyway. And so when you're kind of putting all those things together, along with the fact that you need to build factories, that you need to have ways of getting things around the world, that you need ways of transporting the vehicles. Electric vehicles are classified very, very differently to a combustion vehicle when you put them into a shipping container, because they have a battery. There's very different concerns, even for putting them into a dealership floor. And I think those are all things where the industry is facing a time of certainty about where it's going. So we know for sure we're heading towards electrification, but incredible levels of uncertainty about how you should make the decisions that lead you to that point. At the same time as there's enormous pressure, enormous financial and logistical pressure to make those decisions right. And I think what's coming across from this conference, from some of the roundtables, from a lot of the discussions that people are having around, is that people are really keen for transparency because of that pressure of decisions.
It's a great point, because I think what we see is some people learning, as some companies needing to learn as they go. Maybe they didn't realize how much their load factors on a truck would be impacted by the weight of an electric vehicle, or the different regulations as they come into it. But I think that transparency is really important. We see that at a legislative level as well, as the requirement for sourcing regionally will be tied to certain incentives and due diligence laws, etc. So complicated landscape. That's part of the reason why we're here and why we continue to be here. Finally, another point, we had and you've been doing some reporting on this topic, so I wanted to get your view. We had our first ever Women in Supply Chain panel talking about increasing women in diversity. You've just done some reporting on a feature which will come out soon on this aspects of the sector too. Some takeaways from you. What are some key lessons the industry needs to think about as we look to increase the diversity in the supply chain?
So I think it's really good that we've had that talk this year, because something that is clearly enormous pressure in supply chain, in automotive generally, across almost every industry, is that you need people, and the shortage of people. HR is now part of the supply chain to a fairly significant extent, because if you don't have drivers for your trucks, then your supply chain is broken. And, you know, people can talk about the glory of autonomy sort of 10, 15 years down the line, but the reality is someone needs to drive the truck right now. And you also need, in those decision-making positions for this crucial period, you need to have the best people. You need to have the right people. You need to have people working collaboratively and people with the right knowledge. And that might not be the people who have traditionally made those decisions or who have previously been in the roles. And so I think looking at how you can make sure that you're making your company as friendly to as many people as possible, so that you are getting the right people, that you are getting the best people for every role, in terms of looking at opening up. Even just some of the things that were raised in the panel are like kind of almost embarrassingly basic issues, like making sure that there are female toilets at truck stops.
Yeah. The gloves that fit, PPE equipment that fits. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. But those are the barriers a lot of the time, because we've sort of made a system where we said, well, it fits, so it goes. And so it's really important to make sure, as part of that transparency, that we are discussing all of the barriers in the industry, that we are not being embarrassed to admit that actually there is more that we can do, and that as part of making sure that the supply chain is as robust, as resilient, as adaptable as it needs to be, all of those things are factors that can only help.
Hazel, thank you so much for sharing some of this. This is just the beginning of what we want to share with our audience of the highlights from Automotive Logistics, Supply Chain Global. Keep up with us here on social media, more videos, interviews, and of course reporting from Hazel and Marcus Williams right here on the ground of the Automotive Logistics website. And of course a lot more to come throughout the year and next year as we cover these important topics. Hazel, thanks a lot, and we'll see you again real soon here.